In 1886, Johannesburg was a little mining town. Today, it's the economic and industrial heartbeat of South Africa. Cities all over the world change, evolve and transform. It's happening right now and will continue to happen into the future. How do you design for the future while correcting the past? Who knows what Joburg will look like in 200 years?
My first impression was that Johannesburg is a real historic place in comparison to other African cities.
Apartheid planning was about division and separation.
We need to undo the injustices of the past.
Spatial transformation is reshaping the way in which the city functions.
It's about bringing uses that can coexist closer together. It's a lot more efficient. It makes city living a lot easier.
It's not as dead as people make it sound to be. It's actually full of people who actually live there.
You want people to have a quality lifestyle and enjoy going to work and coming back.
Johannesburg has great potential for the future.
South Africa is a country that is aiming to redress the inherited imbalances of its apartheid past. A possible set of solutions are outlined in the National Development Plan, the principle of spatial justice, spatial sustainability, spatial resilience, spatial quality, spatial efficiency. These are not the only way forward. But to get a better idea of what it is we're dealing with here, we must understand the parameters. What is urban space economy?
Well, when we talk about urban space, we actually talk about the fact that each and every activity in an urban environment happens in space. So whether it's businesses, social interaction, commuting, it actually happens in space.
And what's the main reason people want to be in that space?
It's full of fun.
A mix of different people.
The lifestyle here to see.
The vibe.
The culture.
Everything is near, transport, everything. Really artsy vibe. Joburg is the most places to get a job.
You can see the whole of Africa in one city.
Urban space economy refers to how we live our lives, from the spaces where we live to where we work.
The space relations determine the economic relations and the political relations of people. In urban sprawl, what is actually happening, the poorer people will stay further from the center of time from the suburbs or from where economic opportunities are. It therefore means space will determine whether that family or whether that poor person will be able to move up the social ladder.
This means constant transformation, adjusting to the needs and demands of an ever-evolving society. So what exactly is it that we want to transform and why?
We almost need to build a bridge between the current and the future. Investing to address the historic legacy of deprivation in communities that do not have access to services, to investing in changing the way in which our city works and therefore an ability to invest in the corridors, replenishing aging infrastructure. We can resolve them now, but let's build a different city of the future.
When you're dealing with spatial transformation, you must deal with the fundamental issues of economic and social segregation. So the two are not necessarily two separate processes. They are parts of a very singular process of transformation, and one cannot overemphasize the need for it to be dealt with comprehensively.
How do we transform the urban space? If we do so, are we doing it in a positive way or are we doing it in a negative way? We have a history where it was done in a negative way, and so it resulted in the fragmentation that we have.
Johannesburg is one of the world's youngest cities. It's got youth, energy and vibrancy. What apartheid really did was destroy much of that youth, much of the potential of the city, by putting people into containers.
The apartheid legacy used a range of different methodologies in order to segregate people, but in order to do so from a policy perspective, it needed to manifest that spatially. And using where people reside was effectively the tool that was used to do so.
Communities broken down in racial groups, living in different parts of the city.
The traditional apartheid city in the model was obviously using infrastructure to separate people. So you have highways, transport systems, railway systems to keep race groups apart.
We've got very long commute distances, we've got very low densities, and we don't have a lot of mixed land uses.
It's a very inefficient city.
You could find somebody coming all the way from Vosloorus working in Kempton Park. That is a huge distance.
To undo all of that and to plan around that is not an easy task.
Even when you've worked through the racial dimension in South Africa, you still have to face the question of what kind of city you want, what kind of economy you want, how are people going to work there?
As the city was originally designed to favor one group of people over all others, to achieve our goals, we'll need to redesign it.
Design is critical for the transformation of cities because it creates the framework against which the economy and infrastructure and civil society is able to act.
I'm a strong believer in that one of the problems in South Africa is that designers have been excluded from actual decision-making, from playing a meaningful role in these processes.
Design, especially urban design, is very important for inclusive mobility and an inclusive city. A lot of times we build large infrastructure without thinking of the little design that matters to people who actually use the infrastructure.
Very often people think that design is something that you add at the end of a process to make something look pretty, whereas in fact design is the logic of the city and how it is structured.
That all sounds great, but long term, what's the Joburg we're trying to create now? Although Joburg has changed dramatically over the last decade or two, it is essentially still divided along racial, cultural and economic boundaries. Many people still have to travel long distances just to get to work or to school, even to see a doctor. We want to restitch our city and link the people who live in it to their jobs and link their jobs to where they live. Transit-oriented development is considered the option for Joburg.
Transit-oriented development is one of the most exciting new approaches to the restructuring of cities. It's been used very effectively in many parts of the world.
You get development along transit or along transport lines.
Taxi ranks, bus ranks, train stations, airports, any transit infrastructure allows you to cluster a particular type of land uses, but also to achieve much higher efficiencies.
You can start integrating social and economic opportunities along those corridors, and I think it's an efficient way of doing it.
Many cities have gone through transit-oriented development corridors as a means of development over a long period of time, and they've experienced urban regeneration.
Think about it, when you're in a station or when you're transitioning either between one mode of transport to another, you can do your nails quickly, you can do your hair quickly, you can grab your groceries on your way from home. Now imagine if your home was a walking distance to the transit infrastructure.
Although the rollout of a fully functioning TOD system is in its infancy in Joburg, we thought we'd put the current network through its paces to test if the city is on the right track, so to speak.
I do have a car, yes, but I used to use the car train. Up until before this week, I've never been on public transport. I usually travel solely by vehicle.
Yeah, I have used public transport before. Most of the times I'm using my own car because people tell me that I can't travel by informal public transport, which I disagree with after today.
For me, it was just great to be able to finally see Johannesburg, not from a car window, but just put my feet on the ground.
When you come into the city, you're in your cars and you don't get to actually interact with the city itself. So it was fantastic from that perspective. And I loved it.
The most challenging part of the day for me today has been walking through the streets, dealing with the rubbish.
I've had the most horrid stories of public transport, particularly taxi drivers. There was one trying to rip us off in Marlborough, but the others are the passengers. They were just laughing very loudly and helping us out with the right pricing.
I was a bit nervous going on the taxi, but then I got over it. It was quite cool.
The experience was wonderful. It was great. We actually got onto a taxi.
It's affordable and it was pretty safe.
A cow train, a bus, and we experienced the city.
The experience that I've had with this has just been amazing. It's opened my eyes to the availability and accessibility of public transport in this city.
I really feel that there's a lot of potential here.
Everything was excellent.
It would seem, judging from this little experiment, that Joburg is headed in the right direction. So why is it necessary to reorganize the city to make it more integrated and efficient? Take a look at these statistics on the population and economies of cities in Africa, and let's think about what this will mean for urban living in the future. More than half the world's population will live in emerging market cities by 2050. Cities in countries such as China, India, Russia, Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, Mexico, and South Africa. Now let's take a closer look at Africa's urbanization stats. In 2009, for the first time, Africa's total population passed the 1 billion mark. 40% of that number lived in urban areas. In 2010, Lagos had a population of about 11 million, and in 2025, there will be almost twice as many people. Kinshasa's population in 2010 was a little over 8 million, and this is expected to reach almost 15 million by 2025. The Gauteng city region in which Johannesburg is located is also growing. In 2011, an official census showed that over 12 million people live in Gauteng, making this an urban settlement of a similar scale to the Paris and Los Angeles metropolitan regions. By 2025, it is estimated that the Gauteng city region will be home to about 16 million people. While Africa's cities are growing, their citizens are also becoming more affluent. Approximately 460 million people in emerging market cities will enter the middle class between 2010 and 2015. South Africa's own middle class population will increase from 17 to 22 million during this time. It's predicted that by 2050, more than 60% of Africa's total potential 1.23 billion population will live in urban areas, and that these urban citizens will enjoy improved quality of life and increasing wealth. So how will cities cope with this growth and development? What are some of the key areas of change we should be focusing on?
People are moving to places of opportunity. So our city is growing, our city is densifying. People might be moving into backyard shacks, they might be moving into inner city buildings, but they're moving there because they're closer to livelihood opportunities.
The idea of higher density, mixed typology, walk-up type environments being part and parcel of that spatial transformation.
If you look at the favelas in South America, I think the South Americans have lived with the fact that you can't 100% address the issue of housing. So what do? The favela as it is has water, electricity, provision for public transport. There's also parks, libraries. So I think if we could move towards that direction where we are saying, yes, we understand that we're not going to be able to build houses for everyone, but wherever you are, wherever you've settled, at least have the basics.
The important things in terms of planning is understanding where the city's integrated public transport network will extend itself to, how human settlements are then coordinated to be within those precincts. Obviously, it doesn't exclude issues around services and the other, but going forward in the city, they're going to play a very important role to be very closely integrated and interlinked.
Well, in order to transform this city, I think one key is that it has to be mixed use. Mixed use not just in the sense that you mix business with industrial or other kinds of economic activities, but you need residential here. Because last night when we were going back from the Turbine Hall to our hotel, it was all, dead. So try to bring the activities back, especially at night. And it's not just for clubbing and not just bars, but other activities that will help people realize that you have a lot of wonderful assets here.
As one area of debate then, how will mobility help move transformation forward?
I think mobility is a very critical issue when you're talking about sustainable human settlements, but when you're talking about spatial transformation.
Mobility is not a privilege, it is a right.
Think about your everyday life, what you do when you get up. Mobility is absolutely central to our lives.
Economically active and economically successful cities and towns have a proper transport system.
We really want to see public transport being able to help people to get affordably, quickly, reliably and safely to their places.
Mobility on the back of a mass transit system, a public transportation system, makes for a more efficient urban system.
And how do we leverage land use for inclusion and efficiency?
Assembling land is not an easy business.
We can't make extra land. And so the little that we have, we ought to be using it quite efficiently.
We shouldn't just think about expanding the city, leveraging land by finding new land on the edge of the city. We've got to intensify the use of the land we've got in the city.
Whether it is local government or national and provincial government, the state still owns fair amounts of land, and it's important that that land is used optimally to contribute to spatial transformation.
In terms of the typology, I think it's going to be different than what South Africans and particularly Joburgers are generally used to. I think we're going to see an increase in density, which means a reduction in size.
The question is, how can you start to bring the private and the public sector into a more effective land assembly role, not just for human settlements, but those supporting social amenities we've talked about, the schools, the clinics. How do all these guys start to coordinate their efforts?
And there are huge opportunities. I mean, we can look around us. We see vacant pieces of land. We see pieces of derelict buildings. We can see places where we can go 3 or 4 stories high. We can do a lot to make our city more intense, more exciting, more economically successful through densifying and intensifying.
How do we create a livable space for these millions of city dwellers without driving everyone crazy?
I think it's the role of the state to make a substantial investment in 2 forms of infrastructure. The one is what we call hard infrastructure, your water, electricity, sewage, power. But social infrastructure is just as important, your schools, your clinics, but most importantly, your public spaces.
Everyone says that a healthy mind can only exist in a healthy body. Now, the physical environment has a direct bearing on whether our bodies are healthy or not.
For a very long time, we thought just providing a 4-roomed house in some area is the solution. The problem is there's more to it than just a shelter.
It's not just about affordable housing, it's also about how do we create opportunities for small businesses.
The other key component is sufficient social infrastructure. That has a huge bearing on how the family structure functions.
Public space making.
One of the first shockers in coming to Johannesburg was the fact that I felt as if I didn't get a sense of the city or what the city was all about. A sense of missing the streetscape. That you could actually have a street that you could walk through and encounter other humans doing what humans do, whether it has to do with the kind of transport network that we have or has to do with about the kind of cities that we've created. I do think that we've tended to create the inside city and we've forgotten about the outside city.
The reality is that the private sector creates privatized public space through shopping malls. So it's no accident that there's poor social cohesion because there's actually an absence of spaces where poor and rich people of different backgrounds can interact and not be underneath the gaze of a developer.
And whom should we be looking to as partners for these undertakings?
There's no one stakeholder that can, on its own, achieve spatial transformation.
Cities that succeed not only because of government interventions, but they succeed because of the synergy and partnership that's there.
Clearly, the debate here is about making sure that business and the public sector are having the discussions that are required to provide investment responses to the public sector investment.
I think collaborating as partners around the table is essential.
It's about partnership between government and communities. It's about partnership between the local state and developers.
You really need to have all parts of South African society talking to each other about this. And I don't think yet you're having enough of that conversation.
It's about ensuring that you build a relationship of mutual cooperation and development.
To make a future city that would work for all, it would require the real commitment to work in a collaborative way.
Property developers have to come on board.
We've seen a real consequence, the desire for densification, mixed-use type of developments has been responded to by investors, if you look at Sandton and Rosebank, in response to the Gautrain and other forms of infrastructure investment that the public sector has made.
Communities have to come on board. If communities resist this form of densification and intensification, we're going to have a very, very long battle.
We recognize the need. We have to consider the affordability, because if the infrastructure that's installed is unaffordable, then we've not leveraged the outcome that we'd hoped for. We might have got investment, but we don't have a sustainable city.
Transformation will happen because there is a good political vision and there is goodwill, and the political class is able to mobilize the different interests so that transformation takes place in a sort of environment where everybody sees clearly how their interest is being taken care of.
There is still too big a gap between the government, the private sector, and the community. And this is for historical reasons, but it's something you have to build bridges between them.
You've got to stick with the vision of the city.
If the city of Joburg were to say the corridors of freedom is our plan, if we get out of here, we should be saying, right, that's the plan. How do I contribute to it?
For as long as our plans are not speaking to the needs of the people, then it's as good as not doing anything.
So there are lots of conversations that need to happen amongst different stakeholders in government, but also with the market and with private sectors, with people who use our public transportation, understanding why they use public transportation, why they don't use public transportation, because where people choose to move and live has a direct bearing on what works and what doesn't work.
We have only started to scratch the surface here. There are many issues that we have not touched on, but together we need to unravel the complexity of planning for the future while addressing the issues of the past.
I'm overwhelmed at how far you've come and developed and conceptualized, planned, implemented on time, on budget, and on quality.
Providing solutions that we can all invest in and implement. Through discourse and interaction, we need to find new ways to solve old problems that deliver a sustainable future for all our diverse peoples.
Fantastic idea, very brave, wonderful. You must, however, dig in to what's involved. You've got to get this right, hugely expensive. It'll be of huge world significance. So take your time, talk to people, make the right decisions, build the right things in the right way, build to quality, and make sure it's what the people of Johannesburg want as much as what the politicians want and as much as what the financiers want.
I'll definitely make a subway, maybe more green spaces.
The housing situation in Joburg is very poor.
10 people in one bedroom, imagine.
Every month,
more interaction in the city. Like, I know it's growing already, but like, I hope it moves back here more like aggressively.
The crime, you know?
Pollution.
Definitely make it cleaner and I'd make it safer.
To stop xenophobia.
I don't feel safe when I'm walking there.
Control traffic in the inner city.
We may not agree on how we plan to get there, but we are unanimous in our commitment to using planning to improve the lives of our people.
Well, it's important that you take lessons from those that have gone through these processes, but also adapt them to your own local conditions. City leaders will tell you around the world that most of the things that we do as city leaders are not always new. It is about adapting good practices from other cities and ensuring that these are applicable in your own city and respond to the pressures of your own city.